The metal doors to the grand chamber opened with a sound like thunder. It was a deep, heavy noise that shook the floor. The room beyond was not just a room. It was a hollow sphere, so large that clouds formed near the ceiling. The walls were made of black stone that shined like a mirror. Elias Thorne stepped through the doors. He smoothed the front of his navy blue suit. He checked his tie to make sure it was straight. He looked like a man going to a boring office meeting, not a man walking into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. He walked forward. The walkway was a narrow strip of white light that stretched out into the center of the black sphere. On all sides, floating platforms hovered in the air. There were hundreds of them. On these platforms sat the representatives of the Galaxy Council. They were not human. Some looked like giant insects with hard shells and twitching antennas. Others looked like clouds of gas held inside glass suits. Some were made of living rock. They all looked down at Elias. The design of the room was simple. The council was high above, and the petitioner was low below. It was built to make new species feel small. It was built to make them afraid. Elias walked slowly. His footsteps made a sharp clicking sound on the hard floor. Click, click. The sound echoed in the vast silence. He did not look up. He did not stare at the strange creatures. He kept his eyes on the podium in the center of the room. Behind him, Mary Carter walked in step. She was dressed in her dress uniform. She held a small glass tablet in her hand. Her face was completely blank. She did not look scared. She looked like she was waiting in line at a grocery store. They reached the center circle. The white walkway ended here. Elias stopped. He stood alone in the spotlight. He waited. Above him, the central platform lowered slightly. It was larger than the others. On it sat High Arbiter Xylos. Xylos was tall and very thin. He had 4 arms and skin that glowed with a soft blue light. He had 4 eyes that blinked one at a time. Xylos leaned forward. He looked at Elias like a scientist looking at a germ under a microscope. A small metal drone flew down and hovered next to Elias's ear. It was a translator. Speak, Xylos said. His voice was loud. It boomed through the room. Elias looked up for the first time. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He just nodded. I am Elias Thorne, he said. His voice was calm. I am here representing the Terran Union. The High Arbiter made a sound that sounded like dry leaves crunching. It was a laugh. But it was a cold laugh. We know who you are, Xylos said. We have watched your little world. You are loud. You are messy. You burn your own planet to make energy. You fight over small strips of land. You are barely civilized. Elias did not react. He stood still. The Arbiter continued. The Galaxy Council is the keeper of order. We have brought peace to 400 star systems. We bring law. We bring trade. We bring structure. And now, Xylos said, his voice getting deeper, we bring you a choice. The Arbiter waved one of his 4 hands. A beam of light shot out from his podium. It created a large hologram in the air in front of Elias. It was a document. It was glowing with golden letters. This is the Treaty of Integration, Xylos said. It is a generous offer. Elias looked at the floating words. He could read them clearly. The translator drone whispered the meaning into his ear. Article 1. The Terran Union will destroy all military ships. Article 2. The Terran Union will shut down all weapon factories. Article 3. 50% of the human population will be moved to work camps in the Outer Rim mines. Article 4. Earth will be governed by a viceroy chosen by the Council. Elias read it twice. It was not a treaty. It was a death sentence. It was a demand for slavery. Usually, Xylos said, looking around at the other floating pods, new species cry when they see this. They beg, they ask for better terms. They offer us gold or art, but in the end, they sign. They always sign. Because the alternative is extinction. The room was silent. Thousands of alien eyes watched the small human in the blue suit. They waited for him to fall to his knees. They waited for the tears. Elias reached into his jacket pocket. The guards on the lower level raised their weapons. They were energy rifles that hummed with power. Elias moved his hand slowly. He pulled out a pen. It was a simple silver pen. He clicked the top. Click. The sound was very loud in the quiet room. He tapped the pen against his chin. He looked at the golden hologram. He looked at the part about the work camps. He looked at the part about destroying their ships. Then he looked at XY lost. No. Elias said. It was a quiet word. He did not shout it. He said it like he was declining a second cup of coffee. The translator drone paused. It word. Then it repeated the word in the galactic common tongue. Refusal. Xylos blinked all four eyes at once. He leaned closer. The blue light on his skin pulsed brighter. There seems to be an error, Xylos said. The translator is broken. Did you ask for a pen? No, Elias said again. I said no. A low murmur started in the room. It sounded like the buzzing of angry bees. The aliens in the pods began to whisper to each other. This had never happened before. No one just said no. You do not understand, Xylos said. His voice was tight. He was getting annoyed. This is not a negotiation, human. We are not asking you what you want. We are telling you what will happen. Elias put the pen back in his pocket. He clasped his hands behind his back. I understand perfectly, Elias said. You want our resources. You want our labor. And you want us to be too weak to fight back. It is a very standard Empire strategy. We have seen it before in our own history books. Xylos stood up. He was very tall. He towered over the podium. You are arrogant. Xylos shouted. You are one planet. One tiny, wet rock in the middle of nowhere. We are the Galaxy Council. We command fleets that can blot out your sun. We have weapons that can boil your oceans. You have nothing. Elias looked at Mary. She was looking at her tablet. She tapped the screen once. Then she looked up and nodded at Elias. We have a few things, Elias said. Xylos slammed his hand on the podium. Enough. You have 5 minutes to sign this document. If you do not sign, I will send the signal. My fleet is already waiting at the edge of your solar system. They will burn your cities. They will erase your history. The Arbiter paused. He smiled a thin, cruel smile. Sign it, human. Save your people. Be smart. Elias looked around the room. He looked at the floating platforms. He looked at the advanced technology. He looked at the glowing lights. You think I am refusing because I am proud, Elias said. You think I am refusing because I want to fight you. Yes, Xylos sneered. Primitive species always want to fight. Elias shook his head. He looked sad. No, Elias said softly. I am not refusing to save my people from you. He took a step forward. I am refusing to save you from us. The room went deadly silent. The laughter that had started in the back of the room stopped instantly. The statement made no sense. It was absurd. How could one small planet threaten a galaxy-spanning empire? Xylos looked confused. He looked at his guards. He looked back at Elias. You are insane, Xylos said. Elias checked his watch. He watched the second hand tick around the face. 3 minutes, Elias said. You gave me 5 minutes. I only need 2. What are you talking about? Xylos demanded. Elias pointed at the floor. Your empire is built on technology, Elias said. You use anti-gravity to float these pods. You use energy shields. You use plasma weapons. You use zero-point energy for everything. You have forgotten what it is like to live without those things. So. Xylos asked. So, Elias said. We haven't. He turned to Mary. Do it, he said. Mary pressed a red button on her glass tablet. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a deep vibration went through the floor. It was felt in the teeth and bones of everyone in the room. The hum of the floating pods changed pitch. It went from a high whine to a low, struggling groan. The bright white lights flickered and turned a dull, rusty orange. And then, the fear truly began. The orange light in the grand chamber was not steady. It flickered like a dying candle. The deep vibration in the floor grew stronger. It was a sound that was felt more than heard. A low rumble that rattled the teeth of everyone in the room. High Arbiter. Xylos tapped his fingers frantically on his control panel. His movements were fast and jerky. He looked like a spider trying to fix a broken web. Usually, his podium responded to his slightest touch. It would bring up holographic screens, communication channels, and weapon systems. Now, The smooth black surface was dead. It was just a piece of cold stone. "What have you done?" Xylos shouted. His voice did not boom anymore. The amplifiers were broken. His voice sounded thin and weak in the massive room. Elias Thorne stood perfectly still on the white walkway. The orange emergency lights cast long, strange shadows across his face. He looked up at the panicked alien. "We turned off the power," Elias said simply. "That is impossible," Xylos spat. "The Council runs on a quantum grid. It is an infinite energy source. It cannot be turned off. It is the heartbeat of the galaxy." Elias shrugged. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked very relaxed, like a man watching a slow sunset. "We didn't turn off the source," Elias explained. "We just closed the tap." Around them, the room was falling into chaos. The hundreds of floating platforms were no longer floating smoothly. They bobbed in the air like corks in rough water. The alien representatives were shouting in 100 different languages. To the left, the representative of the krill, a giant insect creature, was clicking its mandibles in terror. Its platform tilted sideways. The creature scrambled to hold on, but its claws scratched uselessly against the slippery metal. Then gravity won. The anti-gravity engine under the krill's pod sputtered and died. The pod dropped like a stone. It fell 10 feet and crashed onto the obsidian floor with a loud, crunching metallic sound. The insect creature screeched, tumbling out of its chair. It was not hurt, just shaken. But the sight caused panic in the rest of the room. One by one, the other pods began to fail. It was a slow, clumsy disaster. Some drifted down gently. Others spun in circles before hitting the ground. The graceful, intimidating circle of the Council was broken. They were literally being brought down to Elias's level. The small translator drone that had been hovering by Elias's ear suddenly stopped whirring. It fell out of the air and clattered onto the floor near his shoe. Elias looked down at it. He kicked it gently aside. He raised his voice so Xylos could hear him over the noise of crashing pods and shouting aliens. "Your technology is very advanced," Elias called out. "It is beautiful. It is elegant. But it is also very fragile." Xylos gripped the edge of his podium. His own platform was sinking. The blue light on his skin was fading, turning a dull gray. He looked down at the human with pure hatred. "You will pay for this," Xylos yelled. "My fleet will vaporize your planet." Elias shook his head. He took a few steps closer to the sinking podium. "No, they won't," Elias said. "Because they can't start their engines." "What madness is this?" Xylos demanded. The podium hit the floor with a heavy thud. Xylos stumbled, nearly falling over his long robes. He was now standing on the ground, only a few feet taller than Elias. "It is simple physics," Elias said. He spoke like a teacher explaining a lesson to a slow student. "Your ships, your shields, your lights, they all use zero-point energy. They pull power from the vacuum of space. It is very efficient." Mary Carter stepped up beside Elias. She held her glass tablet. The screen was the only bright light left in the center of the room. "But," Mary added, her voice calm and sharp, "zero-point energy requires a stable vacuum state. If you change that state, even by a tiny fraction, the energy extraction fails." Elias nodded. "We call it the anchor. We built a machine that creates a bubble. Inside this bubble, the laws of physics are slightly different. Not much. Just enough to stop your reactors from working." Xylos stared at them. His 4 eyes were wide. He looked around the dark chamber. The only light came from the flickering orange emergency strips on the walls. The air was getting stale. The hum of the ventilation fans had stopped. "You altered the laws of nature?" Xylos whispered. "That is forbidden. That is impossible. Humans are good at doing the impossible," Elias said. "Especially when we are backed into a corner." A loud crash came from the other side of the room. A platform holding an aquatic alien in a water suit had hit the ground. The glass of the suit cracked. Water began to leak out onto the floor. "Help!" someone shouted from the dark. "The life support. It is failing." Xylos looked at the human. His arrogance was gone. Fear replaced it. "You are killing us," Xylos said. "Without the grid, the environmental systems will stop. We will suffocate. Elias looked at his watch again. You have about 6 hours of air left in this room, Elias said calmly. And don't worry about the cold. We hacked your system before we turned on the anchor. We switched the ventilation to manual backup. It will be uncomfortable, but you will live. Why? Xylos asked. Why do this? Why not just fight us with ships? Because we would lose, Elias admitted. He was honest. Your ships are faster. Your guns are bigger. If we fought you in a fair war, Earth would burn in a week. He looked around at the chaos. The mighty council members were crawling out of their fallen pods. They looked confused and weak in the darkness. So we decided not to fight a fair war, Elias said. We decided to change the battlefield. Mary tapped her tablet again. A map appeared on her screen. It showed the solar system. It showed the alien fleet surrounding Earth. The ships on the screen were marked with red. Warning lights. Your fleet is drifting, Mary reported. Their main power is offline. Their weapons are offline. They are currently just big metal boxes floating in space. Our tugboats are already towing them away from orbit. Towing them? Xylos gasped. Yes, Elias said. We are going to park them on the far side of the moon. We will probably take them apart later. I hear your hull alloy is very strong. We could use it to build bridges. You are pirates. Xylos screamed. He lunged forward. He tried to grab Elias with his upper claws, but Xylos was weak. He was used to powered armor enhancing his strength. He was used to energy fields protecting him. Without them, his thin muscles were no match for gravity. He stumbled and fell to his knees in front of Elias. Elias did not move. He did not flinch. He looked down at the alien leader. We are not pirates, Elias said softly. We are survivors. He knelt down so he was face to face with Xylos. You tried to make us slaves, Elias whispered. You tried to take our freedom. You thought we were weak because we use fire and explosions to move our rockets. You laughed at our combustion engines. Elias stood up and brushed dust off his knee. But here is the thing about fire, Elias said. It works everywhere. It doesn't need a quantum grid. It doesn't need a server. It just needs a spark. He turned to Mary. Is the path clear? He asked. Mary looked at the darkness behind them. The doors to the chamber were sealed shut. They were magnetic locks, and without power, they had defaulted to the locked position. The doors are sealed, sir, Mary said. Elias sighed. He looked back at HFY Lost. Open the door, Elias ordered. I cannot, Xylos wept. The system is dead. We are trapped here. Elias shook his head. He reached into his jacket again. Xylos flinched, thinking it was a weapon, but Elias pulled out a small gray block of plastic. It looked like clay. He handed it to Mary. Mary took it and walked toward the massive blast doors. She stuck the clay onto the lock mechanism. She inserted a small metal detonator into the clay. What is that? Xylos asked, trembling. That, Elias said, is C4 explosive. It is very primitive. It is very loud. And it does not care about your quantum grid. Mary walked back to the center of the room. She stood behind Elias and covered her ears. Elias looked at the council members huddled in the dark. Cover your ears, Elias warned. The aliens did not understand him. They just stared. Elias sighed. He put his hands over his own ears. Fire in the hole, he said. Mary pressed the button. The explosion was not like the weapons the council knew. It was not a clean, silent beam of light. It was a dirty, violent roar. The sound hit the walls of the obsidian chamber and bounced back, amplifying the noise until it felt like the air itself was punching everyone in the chest. A pondy, massive cloud of gray dust and black smoke billowed out from where the blast doors used to be. Debris clattered across the polished floor. Pieces of twisted metal spun through the air and landed with heavy clangs. High. Arbiter Xylos covered his head with his forearms. He was curled into a ball on the floor. His ears, sensitive to the hum of quantum drives, were ringing with a high-pitched whine. He coughed, choking on the acrid smell that filled the room. It smelled like sulfur and burning chemicals. It smelled like destruction. For a long moment, there was silence. The only sound was the falling of small rocks and the coughing of 400 alien diplomats. Elias. Thorn lowered his hands from his ears. He brushed some dust off his shoulder. He looked at the hole in the wall. The massive magnetic locks, which had held for 1,000 years, were gone. In their place was a jagged smoking opening, large enough for a truck to drive through. Mary Carter stepped forward. She waved her hand in front of her face to clear the smoke. She looked at the destruction with a critical eye. "The structural integrity of the hallway is intact," she said calmly. "The blast was directed perfectly." Elias nodded. "Good work, Mary." Xylos slowly uncurled himself. He looked at the smoking hole. He looked at the humans. His large eyes were wide with a new kind of fear. He had seen planets glassed by plasma beams. He had seen armadas burn. But he had never seen something so raw, so loud, and so chaotic. "You are monsters," Xylos whispered. His voice was raspy from the smoke. "You carry destruction in your pockets." Elias turned to look at the fallen leader. The emergency lights were still flickering, casting long dancing shadows. The room was getting darker as the smoke filled the upper dome. "It is just chemistry," Elias said. "Potassium, nitrogen, oxygen. It is the same stuff that makes plants grow. We just rearranged it a little bit." He walked over to Xylos. The alien flinched, trying to scramble backward on the slippery floor. But Elias did not attack. He just stood there, looking down. "You call us monsters because we are loud," Elias said. "You think your silent lasers and invisible force fields are civilized. But dead is dead, Arbiter. It doesn't matter if it comes with a bang or a whisper." A groan came from a nearby pile of silk cushions. It was the representative of the Centauri, a being that looked like a cloud of golden gas inside a glass suit. "The suit was cracked." "My suit," the Centauri gasped. "The power. The filtration. It is off. I cannot breathe this air." Mary looked at her tablet. She tapped a few keys. "The air in the room is safe," she announced. "It is a bit dusty, but it has oxygen. You just have to breathe it with your own lungs." But the Centauri panicked. It clawed at its throat. "We do not breathe dirty air. We need purified mixtures. We need the grid." Elias knelt down next to the Centauri. "Listen to me," Elias said sharply. His voice cut through the panic. "You have lungs. I saw your anatomy files. They are weak because you haven't used them in centuries, but they work. Take a breath." The alien stared at him, terrified. "Breathe," Elias ordered. The Centauri took a shuddering, gasping breath. It coughed violently. Then it took another. And another. The golden gas swirled inside the cracked suit. "See?" Elias said, standing up. "You are surviving. It is ugly. It hurts. But you are alive." He looked around the room. Hundreds of beings were starting to realize the same thing. They were cold. They were in the dark. Their fancy chairs were broken. But they were not dead. Xylos pulled himself up to a sitting position. He looked at the open door. "You can leave," Xylos said. "Go. Take your ship and go. Just turn the power back on." Elias checked his watch again. "We will go," he said. "But we aren't turning the power back on yet." "Why?" Xylos cried. "You made your point. You proved you are dangerous." Elias shook his head. He looked very tired. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about proving we are dangerous. It is about proving that you are weak." He pointed to the ceiling, towards the sky beyond the stone walls. "Up there, my people are towing your warships. Those ships are the pinnacle of galactic engineering. They are worth more than my entire solar system. And right now, they are being pulled by rust bucket tugboats that run on liquid hydrogen." Elias stepped closer to Xylos. "If we turn the power back on now, you will forget this fear. In a week, you will be back in your floating chair. You will be safe again. You will send a new fleet. You will try to wipe us out because we embarrassed you." Xylos did not answer. He knew it was true. "So," Elias continued, "we are going to leave you in the dark for a while. We want you to sit here. We want you to feel the cold. We want you to feel the hard floor. We want you to remember that without your machines, you are just meat and bone. Just like us." He turned to Mary. "Let's move out." They began to walk toward the smoking hole in the wall. The sound of their shoes on the debris was loud in the quiet room. "Wait." Xylos called out. Elias stopped. He looked back. The suppression fleet, Xylos stammered. The one at your border. The one you said was drifting. Yes? Elias asked. They have life support reserves, Xylos said. But only for a few days. If you do not let them go, they will die. Elias looked at Mary. Mary looked at her tablet. They have emergency rations, Mary said. And they have thermal blankets. Standard issue. Elias nodded. They will be fine, Elias said to Xylos. They will be cold. They will be hungry. They might be scared. But they will survive. He paused, and a small dry smile touched his lips. Unless they decide to give up. That is the test, Arbiter. Humans have survived ice ages. We have survived plagues. We have survived world wars. We know how to endure. Now we will see if the great galaxy council can do the same. He turned his back on the most powerful beings in the universe. Mary, Elias said. Give them one glow stick. We aren't cruel. Mary reached into her pack. She pulled out a small plastic stick. She cracked it. A bright green chemical light flared to life. It was a primitive light, harsh and neon. She tossed it onto the floor in the center of the room. The green light cast strange, long shadows against the black walls. It was the only light source left in the grand chamber. The aliens stared at it like it was a holy artifact. Elias and Mary stepped through the broken door and into the dark corridor beyond. They did not look back. Behind them, the Council of the Galaxy sat in the silence, huddled around a single stick of green plastic, shivering as the temperature began to drop. The hallway outside the grand chamber was usually a place of silence and light. It was usually filled with soft music and the gentle hum of anti-gravity elevators. But now, it was a dark tunnel. The emergency red lights pulsed slowly, making the smooth walls look like the inside of a beast. Elias Thorne buttoned his jacket. The temperature was dropping fast. The station was huge, floating in the deep vacuum of space, and without the heating grid, the cold of the void was creeping in through the hull. Mary Carter walked beside him. She held her flashlight in one hand, and her other hand rested near her belt. She did not have a laser pistol. She had a standard kinetic handgun. It was heavy, made of steel and polymer. It used gunpowder. It was old technology, but it had one big advantage. It did not need a battery. We need to move faster, Mary said softly. The station security will regroup. They might not have comms, but they have eyes. Elias nodded. He checked the map on Mary's tablet. The hangar bay was 10 levels down. We can't use the elevators, Elias said. Mary pointed to a door marked with a yellow symbol. Stairs, she said. They pushed open the door to the stairwell. It was heavy. Most aliens on the station never used stairs. They used lift tubes that floated them up and down. The stairs were dusty. They were built for emergencies that the council thought would never happen. They began to descend. Their footsteps clanged on the metal steps. Clang, clang, clang. It was a lonely sound. On the 5th level down, they ran into the first problem. A group of 4 alien guards was blocking the landing. They were large creatures with thick gray skin and tusks. They wore heavy white armor that covered them from head to toe. Usually this armor was powered by microservos that made the guards strong and fast. But now, the power was gone. The armor was just dead weight. The guards turned when they heard the humans. Their movements were slow and clumsy. The joints of their armor squeaked loudly. They tried to raise their massive energy rifles. Halt! One of the guards grunted. His voice was muffled by his helmet. You are under arrest. Elias stopped on the step above them. He looked down at the struggling soldiers. They looked like turtles turned on their backs. They were fighting against their own protection. Put the guns down, Elias said. They won't fire. The lead guard pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. No blue beam. No burning plasma. Just a dry mechanical click. The guard growled. He tried to step forward, but his heavy boots slipped on the metal floor. He crashed into the railing. The armor was too heavy. Without the power assist, he was carrying 300 pounds of metal. This is a violation of galactic law. The guard shouted, breathing hard. Surrender now. Elias walked past them. He didn't run. He just walked. He stepped around the guard who had fallen. "I am leaving," Elias said. "I suggest you take off that armor before you freeze to death. It acts like a refrigerator in this cold." The guards tried to grab him. One of them swung a heavy armored fist. But it was too slow. It was like watching a statue try to punch. Elias simply ducked under the arm. Mary was right behind him. She didn't say anything. She just kept her hand on her gun. She looked at the guards with pity. They were elite warriors, trained to fight in zero gravity, trained to board starships. But take away their batteries, and they were helpless. They reached the bottom of the stairwell. The door to the hangar bay was jammed. The magnetic seal had failed, but the mechanical latches were stuck. Mary put her flashlight in her mouth. She grabbed the manual release wheel. She pulled. Her muscles strained. The wheel screeched, metal grinding on metal. "Need help?" Elias asked. "I got it," Mary grunted. With a loud pop, the wheel turned. The door hissed and slid open a few inches. They squeezed through. The main hangar was enormous. It was a cathedral of ships. There were sleek silver yachts that belonged to the Diplomats. There were fast courier ships shaped like needles. There were massive cargo haulers. All of them were dark. They sat on the deck like dead whales. Their ramp lights were off. Their engines were silent. The crews were standing around them, waving glow sticks and shouting at each other in confusion. Elias and Mary walked through the crowd. The aliens made way for them. They saw the humans walking with purpose. They saw that the humans were not confused. In a crisis, people follow the ones who look like they have a plan. They reached the far end of the hangar. There, parked in a corner, was their ship. It did not look like the other ships. It was not silver. It was not sleek. It was painted a dull gray. It had sharp angles and exposed pipes. It looked like a brick with wings. On the side, painted in white letters, was the name, the Sparrow. It was a small transport shuttle. It had been modified for long-range travel, but its core design was centuries old. Elias patted the hull of the ship. The metal felt cold and rough. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Elias said. Mary rolled her eyes. She tapped the keypad on the hull. It was a physical keypad with rubber buttons. She punched in a code. There was a clunk and a heavy ramp lowered to the floor. It didn't glide silently. It rattled and banged. A group of aliens had followed them. They stood near the ramp, watching. "You cannot fly," one of the aliens shouted. It was a tall, bird-like creature. "The dampening field. The anchor. It kills all engines." Elias stopped on the ramp. He looked back at the crowd of stranded diplomats and pilots. "It kills your engines." Elias corrected. He walked inside. Mary followed and sealed the ramp. Inside the cockpit, the air was stale but warm. The Sparrow didn't use a recycle loop powered by the grid. It used oxygen tanks and scrubbers. Elias sat in the pilot's seat. He strapped himself in. He looked at the dashboard. It was not a hologram. It was covered in analog gauges, needles, and switches. Mary sat in the co-pilot seat. She began flipping switches. "Fuel pumps?" Elias asked. "On," Mary said. "Ignition coils? Hot oxidizer flow?" Green. Elias took a deep breath. He placed his hand on the throttle lever. "Start her up." Mary pressed a large red button. Outside in the hangar, the aliens jumped back. A loud, roaring sound erupted from the back of the human ship. It was not a hum. It was a series of explosions. Bang dash bang dash bang dash. Bang. Thick white smoke poured out of the exhaust ports. It was chemical smoke. The ship shook. The floor of the hangar vibrated. Inside the cockpit, the noise was deafening. The whole ship rattled. "Engine 1 is stable," Mary shouted over the noise. "Engine 2 is stable." Elias grinned. He grabbed the control stick. "This is Sparrow to hangar control," Elias said into the radio. "We are departing." There was no answer. The radio at hangar control was dead. Elias didn't wait. He pushed the throttle forward. Blue flames shot out of the thrusters. The ugly gray ship lifted off the ground. It wobbled a little. It was not graceful. It looked like a brute force effort against gravity. The ship turned slowly. The blast from its engines blew dust and debris across the clean hangar floor. The shiny silver alien ships were coated in soot. Elias steered the ship toward the atmospheric force field that covered the hangar exit. "Wait," Mary said. "The force field is down. The power is out." Elias looked. The shimmering blue curtain that usually kept the air inside the hangar was gone. There was just the open blackness of space. "Emergency shutters should have closed," Elias said. "They didn't," Mary replied. Elias frowned. "If they flew out, the remaining air in the hangar would be sucked out into space. The aliens standing on the deck would die." He pulled back on the throttle. The ship hovered, engines roaring. "We can't leave them like this," Elias said. Mary looked at the dashboard. "We have 4 breaching charges," she said. Elias nodded. He understood. "Do it." Mary aimed the ship's nose at the massive emergency shutters above the opening. She armed the small projectile launchers. "Firing," she said. 4 small rockets shot out from under the Sparrow's wings. They trailed smoke as they flew. They hit the mechanical latches of the emergency shutters. Boom. Boom. The explosions broke the rusty locks that had failed to engage. Gravity took over. The massive steel shutters slammed down, sealing the hangar bay from the vacuum of space. The air was saved. The aliens were safe. "Now," Elias said. He fired the main thrusters again. The ship shot toward a smaller maintenance airlock. It was a tight squeeze. The Sparrow blasted through the outer doors, scraping its paint against the sides. Sparks flew, and then they were out. Silence returned. The roar of the engines faded into the vacuum. The stars surrounded them. They were floating in the dark void. Behind them, the massive station of the Galaxy Council hung in space like a dead jewel. Its lights were out. It was just a shadow against the stars. Mary checked the sensors. "We are clear of the station," she said. Setting course for the jump point, Elias leaned back in his seat. He looked at the dark station one last time. "Do you think they learned the lesson?" Mary asked. Elias watched the silent giant. "They are cold," Elias said. "They are hungry. And they are stuck. They will have a lot of time to think about it." He pushed the throttle to max. The chemical rockets flared bright against the darkness, a burning torch carried by primitive hands, leading the way home. The Sparrow shook violently as it climbed away from the station's gravity well. The metal hull groaned. Bolts rattled in their sockets. To an alien pilot, the ship would have felt like it was falling apart. To Elias and Mary, it just felt like a standard flight in a human-made machine. Mary watched the radar screen. It was a green circle with a sweeping line of light. "No pursuit," she said. "Their sensors are still blind." Elias nodded. He did not relax his grip on the control stick until they were far away from the dark silhouette of the council station. He flipped a switch cover and pressed the button underneath. "Engaging spin drive," Elias announced. The stars outside the window did not streak into lines of light like they did in the movies. Instead, there was a loud bang, a feeling of being pressed hard into the seat, and then a sensation of twisting. The universe outside turned gray. They were in the slipstream. It was a primitive way to travel faster than light. It was rough, it made people sick, and it was not very accurate. But it worked without zero-point energy. 2 hours later, the gray fog cleared. The stars returned. They were back in normal space, on the edge of the solar system. Ahead of them, a strange convoy was moving slowly through the dark. It looked like a parade of giants being led by ants. The massive alien warships that had threatened Earth were there. They were sleek, silver, and deadly. But they were dark. Their engines were cold. Their weapons were silent. Attached to these giants were dozens of small, ugly human ships. They were tugboats, mining haulers, and repair skiffs. They were covered in rust and scorch marks. Heavy steel cables connected the human ships to the alien warships. The human ships were firing their chemical thrusters, burning bright orange against the black space. They were slowly, painfully dragging the helpless alien fleet away from Earth. Elias keyed the radio. "Sparrow to command," Elias said. "Mission accomplished." The radio crackled with static. Then, a gruff voice answered. "Welcome back, Sparrow. This is Admiral Vance. We see you on the scope. Good to have you home. How are our guests behaving?" Elias asked, looking at the drifting alien cruisers. "They are quiet," the Admiral said. "We boarded the flagship an hour ago." The crew surrendered immediately. They were freezing. We gave them hot soup and blankets. They seemed very confused by the soup. Elias smiled. "They are used to nutrient paste. Real food probably scares them." He guided the Sparrow toward the landing bay of the Admiral's carrier. It was a blocky ship, built for function, not beauty. As they landed, the hydraulic hiss of the landing gear sounded like a sigh of relief. Elias and Mary walked down the ramp. The hangar deck was busy. Mechanics were running back and forth. Soldiers were cheering. Admiral Vance walked over to meet them. He was an older man with gray hair and a uniform that looked slept in. He shook Elias's hand firmly. "You cut it close," the Admiral said. "The anchor field at the Council Station expires in 10 minutes. Elias looked at his watch. "That is plenty of time." Elias sat back at the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. The darkness had become heavy. The cold had seeped into the bones of the diplomats. They sat on the floor, huddled together in groups. The single green glow stick that Mary had left was fading. High Arbiter Xylo sat alone near his fallen podium. He was shivering. His 4 arms were wrapped tight around his chest. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. Then it happened. A low hum started deep inside the walls. It was quiet at first, then it got louder. It was the sound of the quantum grid waking up. The lights in the ceiling flickered. Then, they blazed to life with a blinding white brilliance. The council members covered their eyes and cried out. The anti-gravity generators kicked in. The floating pods, which had been lying like dead beetles on the floor, suddenly lifted into the air. They hovered smoothly, returning to their original positions. The air vents opened with a whoosh. Warm, purified air flooded the room, chasing away the stale smell of fear and chemistry. "Power!" someone shouted. "The power is back!" The diplomats scrambled into their pods. They checked their screens. They checked their life support. They laughed with relief, but Xylos did not laugh. He stood up slowly. He climbed back onto his podium. He looked at the screens that were now active again. He saw the sensor logs. He saw the hole in the blast door. He saw the scorch marks on the floor where the humans had been. "Report." Xylos barked. His voice was amplified again, booming through the room. But it didn't sound commanding anymore. It sounded desperate. A communication officer, a bird-like creature, fluttered its wings nervously. "High Arbiter, we have regained contact with the suppression fleet at the Sol system. Put them on screen." Xylos ordered. "Destroy the humans. Burn them for this insult." The main holographic screen flickered to life, but it did not show a fleet ready for war. It showed a view from the bridge of the alien flagship. The bridge was dark, lit only by human-made lanterns. The alien fleet commander was wrapped in a thick wool blanket that had U.S. Navy printed on it. He was holding a metal cup. Steam was rising from it. "Commander," Xylos shouted. "Report status. Why have you not fired?" The commander looked at the screen. He looked tired. He took a sip from the metal cup. "We cannot fire, Arbiter," the commander said softly. "Our engines are cold. Our weapons are locked out. We are being towed." Xylos asked, "By whom?" "By the humans," the commander said. "They are taking us to the dark side of their moon. They said something about ... Parking fees." Xylos stared at the screen. He could not speak. "Arbiter," the commander continued. "I recommend we do not attack them again. Why?" Xylos whispered. "Because of their dampening field?" "No," the commander said. He looked around the dark bridge. "Because they are insane. They strapped rockets to asteroids just to create a barrier. They eat plants that burn their mouths for fun. They repair their ships with duct tape and hammers. They are chaotic, and they were kind. Kind?" Xylos asked. "They gave us soup," the commander said. It was hot. The transmission cut off as the flagship went behind the moon. Losing the signal, the Grand Chamber was silent again. But this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of understanding. Xylos sat down in his chair. He looked at the map of the galaxy. He looked at the tiny yellow dot that was the human sun. He raised his hand. He drew a red line on the digital map. Circling the entire solar system. Next to the circle, he typed a command. Quarantine zone. Do not approach. Level 10 danger. Why level 10? Asked the Krill representative, clicking its mandibles. Level 10 is for black holes and supernovas. Xylos looked at the shattered blast door. Because black holes are predictable, Xylos said. Humans are not. 3 months later, Elias sat on the porch of his house. It was evening on Earth. The crickets were chirping. The air smelled like rain. He held a cup of coffee in his hand. He watched the sky. A streak of light moved across the stars. It was a new orbital shipyard. They were using the metal from the captured alien ships to build new defenses. They were ugly, blocky stations, but they were strong. Mary walked out onto the porch. She was not in uniform. She wore jeans and a t-shirt. She sat down on the steps next to him. Any news from the council? Mary asked. Elias shook his head. Not a peep. They haven't sent a probe, a signal, or a ship. They are terrified of us. Good, Mary said. She picked up a small rock and tossed it into the grass. You know, Elias said thoughtfully, eventually they will figure it out. Eventually, they will realize the anchor only works for a short time. They will realize our ships are slow. They will realize we were bluffing with a pair of twos. Mary smiled. She looked up at the moon, where the salvage operations were glowing faintly. Maybe, she said. But by the time they figure that out, we will have reverse-engineered their engines. We will have studied their shields. We will have built our own fleet. Elias took a sip of his coffee. That is true. We are fast learners. He leaned back in his chair. The chair squeaked. It was a simple wooden chair. It was not floating. It was not powered by zero-point energy. It was just wood and nails. And it was comfortable. They wanted us to be quiet, Elias said. They wanted us to be part of their perfect, silent order. A thunderstorm rumbled in the distance. It was a deep, rolling sound, full of energy and chaos. Mary grinned. Well, she said. I think we are going to be very, very loud. Elias raised his cup in a toast to the stormy sky. To the noise. He said. To the noise. Mary agreed. Above them, the galaxy continued to spin. It was vast, ancient, and filled with advanced civilizations. But in one small corner, on a blue and green world, a fire had been lit that would never go out. The humans were awake. And they were just getting started.